Sometimes telling the future is easy. I'm reminded of the three construction workers who were on a beam up in a tower in Manhattan while they were working on a skyscraper having lunch, and they would gather, the three of them, every day to open their lunch boxes and eat together and chat. And the first one was sitting there on Monday, opened up his lunchbox, and he saw that he had ham and cheese sandwich. He was like, "This is great. I love ham and cheese. My favorite. Yahtzee." And the second one opened up his lunchbox, and he goes, "All right, turkey and Swiss. My favorite. We're in business. This is great." The third one opens up his lunchbox, and he says, "Oh, man, this is peanut butter and chocolate chip on whole wheat. I hate this sandwich." "Well, we're up on the 60th floor here. What am I going to do?" He grumbles, and he goes ahead and he eats his sandwich, and they all eat their sandwiches, and they talk. And the next day, they sit down. The first guy opens up his lunchbox, and he's got another ham and cheese sandwich. He's happy. He's good to go. The second guy has a turkey and Swiss. He's in a good mood. He's happy. Third guy opens up his lunchbox, and he goes, "Oh, man, I got peanut butter and chocolate chip on whole wheat again. I'm telling you guys, if I get this sandwich in my lunchbox tomorrow, I am going to jump off this building." So they go from there. Again, he's got no choice. He eats the sandwich, grumbles a little bit. They talk. The next day, Wednesday, they all sit down. They're getting ready to open up their lunch boxes. First guy opens up his lunchbox. He's like, "All right, ham and cheese is what I'm talking about." Second guy looks in, and he's like, "All right, turkey and Swiss. We're on a good roll here." Third guy opens up his lunchbox, and sure enough, it's peanut butter and chocolate chip on whole wheat. And he's like, "Well, it's been nice knowing you guys." And he jumps, and he falls all the way down the building to his death. And the second guy turns to the first guy, and he says, "Well, I could kind of see that coming. He packs his own lunch." So occasionally, things are predictable. But we also have to navigate a world in which there's a great deal of great importance that is severely unpredictable. In the relatively proximal realm of these items, I was thinking this week of the economic future, particularly of our children and youth. I was talking with Donald Milton a little bit about the stress and the pressure that is on the lives of a lot of our youth. It seems that every year there's more and more activities, more and more obligations kind of competing for their time as we think about, hey, what can we offer for our youth for a Sunday morning program, and outside of that, what can we fit into their schedules? That gets to be a narrower and a narrower consideration, it seems like, every year. Even sort of compared to when the two of us were in high school, and certainly compared to when the parents of a lot of our youth and folks who are older in our congregation were in those high school years. And I said that what's at stake for them more and more, partly is that there are many more activities available. Also, the need to get into a good college, to get into college, period, and to get into a good college is rising. We found out recently in a Pew Research poll that for the first time since those numbers have been getting compiled, middle-income families no longer represent the majority in America. It's shrunk now to exactly 50%, the way that they measure it, which is between 67 and 200% of the median annual American income. That's defined as middle income, and now only 50% of American families fall into that range. So I hear things like this, and I see that the stakes for accessing that middle or upper income tier and having the stability, safety, health that comes along with it in our country is not a trivial consideration anymore for our youth and for their families. And so I believe wholeheartedly in what we have to offer. And if it's up against something that is offering a student a chance to pay for college or to get into college, I can't discount the importance of those other activities. I honestly don't know kind of whether the question of pressure on our youth is one that is more a genuine concern regarding a potentially significant portion of them not finding themselves in those middle and upper income brackets, or whether the pressure around that question itself is just distracting folks from organizing for economic justice in this country and creating a situation where everyone has a sufficient amount, regardless of income bracket. We can't entirely know, because it's a question that is not only about where we are now, but where we are headed. And as we've found out kind of in this millennium and in recent decades, that's very hard to predict regarding the American economy. So we're stuck. I'm stuck. Our families are stuck a little bit in this place of not knowing. And what do we do with that not knowing? How do we not allow it to compound the anxiety that goes along with that very fraught question? I want to talk in a few different ways about big sorts of not knowing and what we do with it in our lives. The technological future and the singularity is another big area of not knowing for us right now. The singularity is a term for a very rapid increase in artificial intelligence. It's an increase in that artificial intelligence to the point of explosion, where its learning and advancement in computing are uncontrolled by humans and potentially hostile. It's a staple of science fiction novels and movies, also becoming something that a number of serious scientists are beginning to write about publicly. And for the first time, there's a growing number of them, probably still not a majority, but a growing number of very highly placed and respected folks who are wondering whether in our lifetimes that is a realistic possibility. How would it happen? How would we get from the point where, if our robotics are so smart, how come, so many of our household appliances or applications are so unintuitive and so difficult to use? But if you look at the rate of technological change regarding so many different areas, and especially computing, what we see is that things tend to go from very slowly and gradually just increasing little by little, year by year for a long time, and then kind of like a hockey stick on the graph of their complexity, you see a very swift and not necessarily expected bend upwards, where for no necessarily apparent or predictable reason, you hit a turning point, and all of a sudden the increase is pervasive and rapid, and no one necessarily saw that coming, which is, if you're talking about cell phone size, very convenient and great. If you're talking about artificial intelligence, potentially leads to the extinction of humanity, because you could have a form of computer that is capable of doing literally anything, and yet has not been taught that doing anything that might lead to the extinction of humanity is not a good thing. So we're living, in an era where, like I said, the folks who work in directly technological fields who I've talked to, generally not concerned about this. They say, look, I have a hard enough time, getting computer programs to do what I want them to do. I'm really not worried about them becoming smarter than I want them to be. And yet, Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX and Tesla and solar energy company, Bill Gates, and Nick Bostrom, the head of the Future for Humanity Institute, are a few of the folks who have become worried about this and are trying to make it a little bit of a public issue. The Future of Humanity Institute is the first of what is now over a dozen kind of such organizations dedicated to researching and studying what's out there on the horizon that could potentially technologically cause the extinction of humans. So it's, to me, it's not something, to necessarily take lightly or dismiss, but it's also not something that we can say, well, this is coming down the pike at, this time and this year, and this is how we're going to defend against it. It is, again, a big, important area of we don't know. And so what do we do with that not knowing? How do we not allow the anxiety of it to compound with the anxiety of tackling big technological problems that we face? The third big not knowing for me is Fermi's paradox. This is the astrological idea advanced by Enrico Fermi that there are over 100 billion stars in our galaxy and over 100 billion galaxies in the universe. By conservative estimates, about 5% of those stars are sun-like. They're similar to our sun. And about 1% of those stars might have an Earth-like planet orbiting them. So, if we use, again, those very conservative low-end estimates, that would still mean that there are 100 billion Earth-like planets in the universe, or 100 for every grain of sand on every beach in the world. And people look at that, astronomers look at that and ask, well, if there's that many planets that could support life, then how come none of them have supported a form of life that was intelligent enough to make contact with us? Because the search for extraterrestrial intelligence has been going now for decades, and we have absolutely zero evidence that there is any other intelligent life out there in the universe. It makes you feel a little bit lonely when you think about it. It maybe is a little bit scary to wonder, is there something about intelligence that once a species develops it, it doesn't make it to the point of interstellar or intergalactic travel? If there's that many planets out there and no one's gotten to that point, does that mean we're headed for whatever happens at that point? We don't know. It's understandable to be confused, scared, feel alone in these circumstances. It leaves us, I think, susceptible to idolatries, to wanting to come up with answers in this instance just for the sake of having answers. Hence, our fifth source as Unitarian Universalists, which is humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. It's saying, regardless of whether we like the results of what we're finding out with reason and with scientific inquiry. We are called to take them seriously and directly and not use the avoidance of idolatries and of easy, simple, pre-made, unchanging answers. We really don't actually know about these areas and many others that are very important, and it's an okay reason to be scared. What I think we are called to in contemplation of those is embracing the mystery. It's been a theme for us this month in worship, and I think the words that we heard of Khalil Gibran this morning get kind of at some of the spiritual work that is to be done here. Gibran writes, "The timeless in you is aware of life's timelessness and knows that yesterday is but today's memory and tomorrow is today's dream, and that which sings and contemplates in you is still dwelling within the bounds of that first moment which scattered the stars into space. Who among you does not feel that their power to love is boundless? And yet who does not feel that very love, though boundless, encompassed within the center of their being, and moving not from love thought to love thought, nor from love deeds to other love deeds? And is not time, even as love is, undivided and spaceless?" Again, that which sings and contemplates with you, in you, is still dwelling within the bounds of that first moment which scattered the stars into space. The universe will always be made up of that which dwelled within the first bounds of that first moment, scattering the stars into space. That's not going away. What we know of our universe and of our world is that all the matter was originally contained in that first moment. And so those opportunities for contemplation and those impulses to singing in us, whatever they come from, wherever they originated, however they find themselves manifest in our beings, they simply cannot go away. They will perpetually be a part of the universe. And so whatever is there, those ingredients are still going to be with us. There is a lesson for being in this space of not knowing, I think, also from Unitarian history in particular. I try in general to talk about Unitarian and Universalist history as much as possible, but this lesson is one of humility, and I have to admit the transgressors for that have been primarily Unitarian in our history. I want to talk a little bit about two of my mentors in ministry, John Haynes Holmes and Theodore Parker, who can teach us a little bit about the importance when you're looking at scientific teachings of being humble. Theodore Parker used in both his correspondence and his preaching some of the scientific teachings of his day. But one of the ones that he touched on that doesn't look so great now is craniology. And the idea that different races and classes had different traits which you could in part trace to different characteristics of their brains, studied through the pseudoscience of craniology. John Haynes Holmes was in using his teachings and using the teachings of science to inform his theology. One of the scientists that he paid attention to was Lamarck. He was in some ways a Lamarckian, and you may remember that name from your biology classes as the evolutionary theorist who almost entirely lost out to Darwin. Everything that he thought about how kind of heritable traits could be passed on from generation to generation turned out to not work at all, and Darwin completely won those sorts of debates. But if you go back now and read Holmes's material, a lot of it comes from what we know now to be specious theories. So I look at these, and it reminds me that whatever conclusions we want to draw from science, we know that from the fifth source, we want to be continually avoiding idolatries with the teachings of science, but we also want to not make an idolatry of science itself. We want to not get too wrapped up fundamentally in our current day perceptions of science, because those can also lead us astray. Hopefully, someday, I will reach a status where a divinity school student of the future is going to be looking back at a YouTube video of this sermon and laughing at my putting out the possibility of the singularity, saying, well, he was way off, that's ironic. Although maybe the alternative is me ending up on a watch list for our robot overlords of the future. So that could actually be the better option. We are beginning, in a lot of ways, to take a more humble approach to thinking about the future in our faith movement. I look at the work that is done around scenarios thinking and Faith Formation 2020 that a lot of our leaders are working with, and that implies a level of not knowing, embracing not knowing, because you're looking at multiple different possibilities that is healthy. Overall, we are becoming a more, I think, patient and humble faith movement, and that is often gratifying and at times also frustrating to see. We know that as it takes more time to get somewhere together, as we apply this humility by really taking the time to genuinely get down into the questions that humility calls us to ask, we move a little bit slower. And overall, I think that bringing those lessons into our processes is a good thing and a healthy thing, and gives me hope for where we are headed and how we are headed there. It's hard dwelling in a place of humility and of not knowing and of dwelling in the mystery. That is not a comfortable spot to be. What it takes is courage, persistence, to, in the words of Hebron, let today embrace the past with remembrance and the future with longing. So I say, let us go longingly into that future and humbly embrace the mystery along the way. Peace, salam, shalom, and may it be so.